All right, everybody, Happy New Year. And I'm doing my New Year. I'm celebrating New Year the same way that I celebrate every other day of the year by reading books. And I just happened to finish The Morning Star, or rather, the third book in the Morning Star series, The Third Realm, by Karl Knausgaard, and as ever, translated by Martin Aitken. I don't think this will be a particularly long review because this book suffers very much from being middle book syndrome, middle story syndrome, middle entry in any type of series, but we'll get into that later. Why did I choose this book? Because I'm rereading through the whole series. If you don't know, this is probably my second favorite work. Like, Murakami is my favorite author, and then below that, I can't say Knausgaard is my second favorite because I've only read The Morning Star. I have all the books of my struggle, but I haven't gotten to those yet. So, but as it stands, The Morning Star is definitely my second favorite work of contemporary literature. So to that end, I'm trying to get to the fourth book, The School of Night, in my reread here. And whom would I recommend this book to? That's very, very simple. Anybody who's read the other two books. And that's kind of both. Some people find it a pro. I personally find it a con of this book. This very much continues where The Morning Star left off, featuring a lot of the same characters, albeit, and a lot of the same plot lines, albeit usually from different perspectives. In a lot of ways, it's the mirror to The Morning Star. It's The Morning Star 2, where The Wolves of Eternity was more its own standalone thing. And I always felt that the first book, while it wouldn't be the most satisfying thing in the world, did at least have a lot of satisfying thematic resolutions to it that made it work as a standalone, even if the plot wasn't necessarily standalone. But whereas The Third Realm absolutely is just a part of the series, it has neither a beginning or an end to it. A lot of the character arcs are picked up in the middle and don't resolve anywhere. A lot of the themes are just picked up and continued on, but don't go anywhere or result in any resolution. It's just a whole lot of story that doesn't really move a whole lot forward, and I'm really not a huge fan of that personally. Which isn't to say that I disliked this book. Getting into the pros and cons, I already mentioned, like, in terms of the cons, nothing gets resolved. It's just continuing a lot of the same stuff. But it's going to be a pro to a lot of people, and I will say this. It's interesting to get to see, in a lot of the first book, there were relationships that weren't working out really great. You had Arne and Tove. Tove, I think. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce these names. They're Norwegian, so I'm going to be so bad. I'm sorry. Arne and Tove. And you also had Katarina. Is it Katrina or Katarina? Hold on. Catherine. Holy God, that's embarrassing. You had Catherine and Gaute. Gaute. I don't know how to pronounce it. So the first book, you followed Arne and Catherine. Oh my God, I'm so bad with names. In real life, too, I'm so bad with names. Catherine, I don't know. Catherine is what I'll go with for now. And in this book, you get Gaute, her partner's perspective, and Tove, Arne's partner's perspective on things. And I appreciate getting to see the other side of it because, while I don't necessarily think it changes a whole lot in terms of how I view these dynamics, I think it really ties into something that I mentioned as a pro in The Wolves of Eternity, was how he took unlikable characters and made you like them, or characters that you kind of like, but he adds these obnoxious traits to them. They feel really like people. There aren't many characters that I entirely like or dislike. They have things I like about them and things I dislike about them. And I think that adding this other dynamic to it, into this sort of relationship dynamic, helps you see how these characters, you've seen their internal thoughts, you've seen what they're trying to do, and now you're getting to see how those internal thoughts are impacting other people, but not just how those internal thoughts, how those intentions are impacting other people, but how other people are then misinterpreting those intentions and then acting from there. And it adds a lot of layers into how these characters are acting and reacting to things that really make them fleshed out and enjoyable and a pleasure to read. I'm not usually a fan of books with multiple perspectives, because while I appreciate that this is exactly what you can kind of get out of it, although at the same time, The Wolves of Eternity didn't have that and still managed the same thing. So I think it's just Knausgaard being a really good author. So I'll kind of back away from that point, and instead say that, again, just he has a really, in terms of a pro, it's just such an easy book to read and get through. I think I read it in like 3 days, maybe 3 or 4 days, which 500-page books, but the text is nowhere near as small as it was. I say 500 pages, but in terms of word count, I'm sure it doesn't even come, it's probably like half that of The Wolves of Eternity. And The Wolves of Eternity itself was such an easy read because Knausgaard's... It's difficult, of course, always to say between Knausgaard's style or Aitken's translation, but regardless, it flows very easily. It's very easy to read, although there are a few typos here and there in my copy of the book, which the decline in editing is something that is very unfortunately part of our modern book industry. In terms of the cons of the book, I don't, like I said, it's middle book. It has no real beginnings, it has no real endings. A lot of things happen, but no answers are solved. It's just a bunch of deepening of mysteries, and coming from fantasy and well, I say coming from, but it's been over a decade now, but you know, I used to read a lot of fantasy. I used to like a lot of ongoing shows and whatnot. And what I found was that the mysteries were always more fun to follow than the solutions. And time again, I'd get wrapped up in these mysteries, only for the solution to be unsatisfactory or not live up to it, only to realize that in the end, the mystery itself just wasn't really that engaging thematically. It was more just the questions of, well, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? I wasn't really thinking about the work on a deeper level. It was a very surface way of approaching things that I was reading and media and art that I was engaged with. And it's one of the reasons I don't like series nowadays. I think if you have a point, you can usually make your point very succinctly in one book. And if it requires multiple books, maybe it requires multiple books, but I find that it tends to expand the thematic scope to something that takes attention away. I prefer a much more focused approach on a few themes explored a different way rather than this really huge thing. And one of the things that I liked about the Morning Star, and one of the things that, as I understand how they proceed from here, book 4 and 5, is that each one kind of stands on its own. It's not, broadly speaking, one story told over several books, but the Third Realm is definitely the exception to that, in that it's just a straight continuation from the Morning Star. In that sense, I almost don't even feel like doing a whole lot of analyses, because a lot of the talk about themes and whatnot are mostly just continued from the Morning Star and the Wolves of Eternity, because it's mostly the same characters. I mean, you don't get the scientific approach that you did in the Wolves of Eternity, but this book does focus more on, while there are more subplots, really, I think one of the major ones that it's building up towards is the Norwegian black metal scene, which is somebody who is into death metal, and I'm not huge on black metal, but it's okay. There are some bands that I enjoy. It's definitely an interesting take on it to hear it from somebody who very clearly has a more academic understanding of black metal than necessarily listens to it on their own, which is fine. I find Line's character, Line, I think there's a Hermione later, and she says that their names rhyme, so I'm Line, maybe, I don't know. So I found her sections in particular simultaneously interesting and frustrating. She's a teenager. Well, she's actually in her 20s, but she acts like a teenager. She's got that arrogant, I know best. My parents are always pushing. Well, not my parents. She views her mom as a busybody who won't give her a moment of peace, and it frustrates her. But we've seen her mother's perspective from the first book. We know that her mother is worried about her, but also wishes that she was a bit more engaged, views her as a bit naive. And as we see from this chapter, or this book, she is a bit naive, more than a bit, and it makes her incredibly frustrating to read. And this sort of makes it a pro. Very few authors can do first person from multiple points of view and really bring each character's unique voice to it. And I think that Knausgaard does this really well, but I also think that what I really like about first person over third person is first person really filters everything through a character's perspectives. And Knausgaard captures this so well with Tove and the way that she views Arnie's behavior and action as him wanting to be the macho man, wanting to be in charge of everything and getting off on it. And maybe to some slight extent that's true, but having seen Arnie's perspective, he's definitely not getting off on it. He drinks and is having a very hard time coping with it, actually. But you can see Tove's gradual descent from, well, I'm being harsh on him, to not really caring one way or another, literally going on to outright antagonizing him. And the way that she spends less and less time with her kids, and the way that she thinks about them less and less as it goes on. And the way that Knausgaard incorporates this kind of really writing it from the character's perspective rather than a more omniscient viewpoint, which I think when you're writing a story with so many different points of view, one way or another, you tend to, as an author or, as a storyteller, want to bias towards that type of thinking because you want to keep everything in your head. And he does just such a great job of infusing every single perspective with that character's perspective, to the point where you really have to remind yourself that these people are not objective. It may be a multiple viewpoint. You may be seeing things of a character that you won't necessarily see inside their head, but that doesn't mean that necessarily what you're seeing from this character's head is what's really going on. So that I would definitely say is a huge pro. In terms of analyses, like I said, since it's just continuing everything, there's really two thoughts that I had while reading this book that I wanted to bring up. The first is fairly simple, but tying into what I've said in the past about objective reality versus subject reality, or that is to say your experienced reality, and why I enjoy authors like Murakami and Knausgaard, and why I enjoy surrealism in general, is that it's all about exploring the your perceived reality, your experienced reality, and the significance of that reality. And Tove, at one point in this book, mentions that meaning comes from inside. And I think that is really a great way of thinking about countering what I view as this sort of modern reliance on rationalism and this modern reliance on objectivity, in the sense that while there is external stimuli, it's really how we interpret that stimuli and what we make of it comes from inside. And how we then choose to behave comes from the inside. So you can try to understand the objective, the external stimuli, but really what you need to be looking at is the internal, how we process that stimuli, in order to appreciate how that is then going to impact behavior and human behavior, because meaning, understanding, and purpose, all that comes from within us. So that was one thing that I appreciated from this book. And then another one, what's interesting is, and slight spoilers here, usually if the analysis section goes into spoilers, but since I'm only going to be talking about this. There's not going to be huge spoilers, but the whole point of this star phenomenon is while this star is in the sky, nobody has died. Death has ceased to be a thing. And what's interesting, hopping from all these points of views, is that you see people with different parts of the puzzle, but nobody has the whole picture. And it's almost frustrating as a reader in the sense that if person A and person B just communicated or were better at talking, then they would have more of a clue as to what's going on. So as a reader, we obviously get the insight into what's happening, but get a better insight. But for instance, you have Seibert, who is, as a funeral home worker, or owner rather, of several funeral homes, catches on to the fact that people aren't dying. You have his brother, who reads dream libraries and notices that a lot of people are starting to have strange dreams, but they're not in contact with or they talk to each other, but they never talk about those two things and its connection with the star. People who have noted that their children have started having nightmares in relation to the star, but they've not tied that to the deaths. The black metal band having their ritual, and nobody else seems to have potentially tied that to the star or even questioned if it's related. You have all these different bits of information scattered about, and it's frustrating in a sense, because if there was just a way for the people to it's all there, but because everybody is living their own life, nobody has the big picture. And while this isn't any kind of point that I think that Knausgaard is trying to make, when you're talking about purpose, when you're talking about meaning, it just makes me think how much else is going on in life where there is a big picture, but because we're all so busy in the trenches, we're all so busy living it, we can't make it out. If we could just have an aerial perspective, it would all be so clear, it would all be so vivid, but we don't. And we're stuck trying to piece together everything. It's like trying to navigate a corn maze. If you have like an aerial photograph, you can just see the way perfectly, but we don't have that. So we're all just lost and wandering and doing our best. It also calls to mind the September 11th attacks in the United States, because all the information about those attacks, in order to know that they were going to happen and prevent them, was actually in the hands of various law enforcement agencies. But because departmental cooperation at the time was not encouraged, and in fact they were very competitive with one another and very secretive about what they had, the attacks were able to succeed even though all the information was there. So same thing, similar idea, just in terms of everybody having pieces of information, but not necessarily means of meeting up, of realizing what you have and of piecing it all together. So it made me think about that, but I don't think that's necessarily a theme of the book so much as just something that reading the book brought into me. So that's the third realm. Don't have much to say about it, because what is there to say? If you've read the first two books and you like them, you're going to read the third realm. If you read the first book and you didn't care for it, then you're not going to read the third realm. It doesn't close anything. It doesn't answer any questions. It just raises a bunch of other questions. And on its own, if this were just a book on its own, it would be absolute nonsense. As it is in the larger part of the series, it's the middle book. It continues something that I enjoy, but it offers very little on its own. So join me next time when I talk about who knows. I'm actually going to come back here and add another addendum to this, which is the title of the book is The Third Realm. And in The Morning Star, I talked about the significance of the Morning Star. In The Wolves of Eternity, I talked about how the quote, it ties into a quote about the wolves of, or about a poet. But with the Third Realm, to really just highlight sort of how middle book this is, it can't even really work in the title in a way that is self-explanatory. One of the band members mentions that the first realm is the realm of God, the second realm is the realm of Jesus, and we are currently in the third realm, which is supposedly the realm of the spirit. But how that is meant to tie into this particular story, I don't know. How the realms are supposed to relate to each other, I don't know. Whether this is in reference to time, like before the death of Jesus Christ would have been the realm of God, the death of Jesus Christ would have been the realm of Jesus, and then something happened, I don't know. The Industrial Revolution is the realm of the spirit, I don't know. And it feels more like all the titles to this point have been things in the book that were majorly important to the characters, and I can see how this one was chosen. But because we never get the point of view of the character who is talking about the third realm, we never get any thoughts or reflections on what the third realm is, what it means, and what the broader context of it is for the book. So it really just is a perfect encapsulation of how this book just absolutely cannot stand on its own, when even the titular the title that is for the other two so central to understanding the themes and thoughts going on in the book is just kind of brought up and then moved on from without any further depth or exploration.